We welcome back to the show Pennsylvania Senator Dave McCormick, a member of the Banking Committee who actually introduced Kevin Warsh. Senator McCormick, welcome, sir. I think he passed with flying colors, apart from slings and arrows from the usual topics, Elizabeth Warren, blah, 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 blah. But I think he said a lot of important things. I think you've got some fresh air coming to the Fed. What are you thinking?
I think he did a great job. I mean, I think in my introduction, I said, I think through your questions, you will see what I've known and seen for 30 years, which this is a thoughtful, independent thinker. It's someone with deep experience at the Fed, deep experience with markets. And this is a man with the heart of a reformer who's going to drive change. And it's also a man who understands that monetary policy is about the American dream and making sure you have price stability and full employment, and that he is someone who understands what that means for ordinary working families. And so I thought he did a spectacular job. He was unflappable, as I expected. He didn't get in the least bit rattled by the vicious, unfair, and ridiculous commentary of Elizabeth Warren. And I'm proud of him, and I think he's going to be confirmed, and he's going to be a great Fed chair. And I think he held to, look, we know Kevin very well, interviewed him many times, talked to him down through the years. He held to his long-held views. I mean, for example, AI and productivity are going to figure into the calculations. There's too much gibberish among the Fed presidents. They should stay out of politics, stay out of climate change, stay out of DI, right? It's not a central planning agency. It's a monetary agency. You can't talk monetary policy without talking about money ever. He even challenged some of the inflation. Maybe we should be using some of these other inflation measures from the other reserve banks. And he said, let's have a family quarrel. Let's have instead of forward guidance that never changes, let's have a discussion and see what's happening right now at this particular meeting. I mean, all this stuff sounds like common sense, but it would be brand new for the Fed. Well, he's a change agent, and he quoted at the end of his testimony Milton Friedman about the tyranny of the status quo. This is a guy who's going to challenge everything, and rightly so. We are in a moment of remarkable transformation in the economy. The Fed's outdated models, the reams of data driven by economists in the bowels of the Fed is not going to lend itself to the kind of policy dynamism and creativity we're going to need in the future. And I think Kevin recognizes that. He's smart enough to be able to straddle the traditional Fed thinkers with a recognition of the changing world. And that's why I think he's going to be so spectacular in this moment. Well, I think he's a growth guy. I really think he's a growth guy as well as a price stability guy. Senator, it was interesting to me that Senator Thom Tillis, who has held up the nomination in light of these court proceedings with respect to Jay Powell and the overruns, but Tillis defended Warsh and said he was in complete compliance and would look forward to helping him out. Now, I want to go back to something you told me, I don't know, a week or two back. Is it possible still to have an off-ramp about this debate and bring the, let's say, the cost overrun debate or investigation into the Senate Banking Committee? You suggested that. I thought it was a pretty good idea. I don't know whether you've spoken to Senator Tillis or not. Yeah, listen, I've spoken to Senator Tillis, and I've certainly spoken to our chairman, and I listened to the president very carefully. I think the president rightly wants accountability. He knows that this was terribly managed. He's not sure why. It's probably gross incompetence, and he wants to make sure there's accountability. And listen, my position's been clear. I don't think there's any evidence of any criminal misconduct on the part of Jay Powell, but I do think it's critical that the American taxpayers are assured that there's accountability of what this project, runaway project, actually has happened. So I think the Banking Committee has jurisdiction. It has subpoena power. If it was to uncover any sort of criminal misconduct, it can refer it back to the FBI. So I'm hopeful that the Banking Committee will get an opportunity to really take this on and demonstrate to the American people that we can hold people accountable and get to the bottom of this thing. I'm not in the middle of any negotiation or anything like that, but I'm hoping that we'll be able to find a way by maybe relying on the Banking Committee, because listen, we got to get Kevin Warsh in place by May 15th. This moment cannot stand having the uncertainty around when we have new Fed leadership. It requires him to be in the chair. and really be able to drive smart monetary policy for America at a time when there's a lot of uncertainty in the world.
Senator McCormick, last one. Let me switch gears. I have to do it. At the moment, it appears that there will be no Iranian meeting in Pakistan tomorrow. President Trump has said that means basically combat military bombing missions will resume. I'm a big fan of the blockade. I also am a big fan of seizing the bank assets of the various crazy people running the Revolutionary Guard. But it does look kind of grim regarding tomorrow.
Well, listen, we're at a fork in the road. And part of the problem is within Iran, you have multiple parties seeking leadership. It's never clear who actually is calling the shots. This is not going to be a straight line. The president's made it very clear they've got two options: a negotiated settlement, which will give up the enriched uranium and give up any hope of having a nuclear capability and stop the terrorist financing, or they can feel the wrath and the additional capability of the U.S. military taking out additional dual-use capability. I hope they'll choose right. We should be very dubious of the Iranians. They've lied again and again. I think the president knows that he's getting a lot more capability over time in the Gulf with our military, and at the same time, this blockade's really working. So I'm not going to make any predictions other than to say I think we're well positioned. Regardless of what the Iranians decide to do, I hope there'll be a peaceful resolution. But the American military has shown it's very precise in terms of its ability to hit those targets, and more may be necessary. We'll have to see.
Well, I think the blockade is a brilliant thing, Senator, and I think the blockade squeezes their economy and their financial system down tougher and tougher and tougher. They won't be able to pay their bills. They won't be able to make payroll. They won't get those fat retirement packages, and Lord knows what else they got. Here, let's see. Here's Trump. Mr. Trump has just put up on Truth Social. I'm going to have to read this. Based on the fact that the government in Iran is seriously fractured, not unexpectedly so, and upon the request of Field Marshal Asim Munir and Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif of Pakistan, we have been asked to hold our attack on the country of Iran until such time as their leaders and representatives can come up with a unified proposal. I have therefore directed our military to continue the blockade and in all other respects remain ready and able, and will therefore extend the ceasefire until such time as their proposal is submitted and discussions are concluded one way or another. Thank you. Senator McCormick, you're quick. It seems like Mr. Trump has extended the ceasefire, and we're going to stay with the blockade, which I think is a heck of a good, powerful tool.
I absolutely agree. The blockade's working. The other thing that your listeners should know, to your viewers, is that we have also opened up a corridor in the Strait where there's 12 to 15 ships going through every day. So every day that goes by, we're opening up more capability in that corridor, and we're putting more pressure on Iran. I think it's a good posture. Let's hope that cooler minds prevail in Iran and we can get to a negotiated settlement that achieves the president's goals.
All right. Well, there you go. Senator Dave McCormick, you're a newsmaker because you prompted President Trump to put out his Truth Social posting live on the Kudlow Show. And for that, we love you. Thank you, sir. We appreciate it very much.